Dynasties in sports aren't just about winning. They define an era. They create legends. They leave a mark that echoes through history. And no dynasty in basketball was as dominant, as electrifying, and as unbreakable as the 1990s Chicago Bulls. Led by the larger-than-life figure of Michael Jordan, the masterful leadership of Phil Jackson, and the all-around brilliance of Scottie Pippen, this was more than just a team, it was a global phenomenon. 6 championships in 8 years, to 3 peats, a level of excellence the NBA had never seen before, and may never see again. But then, just like that, it was over. The greatest dynasty in basketball history was torn apart in the blink of an eye. The Chicago Bulls never defended their throne. The championship team was dismantled. Michael Jordan walked away from the game at his absolute peak. Phil Jackson was forced out. Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr gone. How does something so perfect just end? Was it ego? Was it money? Was it an unavoidable fate written in the stars? Or was this dynasty sabotaged from the inside? Today, we dive deep into the truth behind the Chicago Bulls collapse, the real reason why the greatest team in NBA history was destroyed from within. Because this wasn't just the end of a team. This was the end of an era. 1. The perfect storm. Every great empire faces its moment of reckoning. For the Chicago Bulls, that moment wasn't a crushing defeat on the court, it was a storm brewing behind closed doors. A storm made of clashing egos, broken trust, and an unwillingness to compromise. The 1997-98 season wasn't just another championship run. It was a war between dominance and destruction, between legacy and power. But even as the champagne flowed, the cracks in the foundation were visible. General manager Jerry Krause, the man who had assembled this legendary team, had already decided that change was inevitable. His message was clear: no matter what happened in the upcoming season, Phil Jackson was out, and this team would be broken apart. And in that moment, the fate of the dynasty was sealed. Michael Jordan, the heart and soul of the Bulls, had made it known he wouldn't play for any coach other than Phil. Scottie Pippen, frustrated with years of being underpaid, was growing more distant from the organization. Dennis Rodman, the unpredictable wild card, had started showing signs of decline. The unity that had defined the Bulls was unraveling before the season had even begun. It was a statement that shook the NBA world, a statement that ignited a firestorm. The players felt disrespected, undervalued. For years, Jordan, Pippen, and the Bulls had defied the odds, winning title after title. But now, their biggest battle wasn't against the Knicks, the Pacers, or the Jazz, it was against their own front office. What followed was a season like no other. Tension, resentment, a sense of impending doom. This was no longer just about basketball, it was about pride, about proving a point. The Bulls weren't just playing to win, they were fighting against their own expiration date. 2. The power struggle. At the heart of the Bulls' collapse wasn't just time, it was a battle of control, a fight for dominance that went beyond the basketball court. The biggest names in NBA history were now engaged in a war not against opponents, but against each other. On one side stood Michael Jordan, the greatest player of all time, alongside his trusted lieutenant Scottie Pippen and the mastermind Phil Jackson. On the other side, Jerry Krause, the man who built this dynasty, and the man who would ultimately tear it down. Jerry Krause was a genius when it came to talent evaluation. He had assembled the pieces that led to 6 championships. But despite his success, he felt overshadowed, disrespected. He believed that management, not just players and coaches, deserved the credit for winning. And he was determined to prove it, even if it meant destroying everything he had built. That statement sent shockwaves through the Bulls' locker room. Jordan and Pippen had spilled blood, sweat, and tears for this team. They had fought through injuries, tough opponents, and relentless media pressure. But now, the man who was supposed to support them was publicly diminishing their role in the dynasty's success. The divide between the players and management had never been wider. Michael Jordan took it personally because, of course, he did. This wasn't just about winning, it was about legacy. Jordan had always played with a chip on his shoulder, and now, the very organization he had put on the map was turning against him. But it wasn't just Jordan who felt betrayed. Scottie Pippen had been the backbone of the Bulls for years, playing through injuries, taking on the toughest defensive assignments, and sacrificing his individual accolades for the sake of the team. But behind the scenes, frustration was boiling over. Despite being one of the best players in the league, Pippen was severely underpaid, earning just a fraction of what lesser players were making. He had signed a long-term deal early in his career for security, but as the NBA's financial landscape changed, his contract became a burden, a contract the Bulls refused to renegotiate. The tension reached its peak when Pippen, out of sheer frustration, decided to delay his surgery until the season started, making a clear statement to the front office: "If you won't take care of me, why should I rush back for you?" And then there was Phil Jackson, the Zen master, the man who had orchestrated this entire dynasty. Krause had already made up his mind this would be Jackson's last season, no matter what. Phil had always had a way of controlling egos, of bringing out the best in his players, but now, the biggest ego he had to manage wasn't a player, it was in the front office. The power struggle was in full force. The front office wanted control, the players wanted respect. And in the middle of it all was a dynasty on the verge of destruction. The 1998 season wasn't just the last dance, it was a battle for survival. 3. The Last Dance. Despite the chaos behind the scenes, the Bulls had one final mission to cement their legacy. The 1998 season was more than just a championship run. It was a farewell tour, a swan song for one of the greatest teams ever assembled. Every game felt like borrowed time. The tension in the locker room was undeniable. Jordan and Pippen, battle-hardened warriors, knew that this was their last ride together. And Phil Jackson, he embraced the moment, famously naming the season The Last Dance, a poetic nod to their inevitable breakup. Injuries, media pressure, contract disputes, none of it could break them. The Bulls fought through the regular season, grinding their way to the #1 seed in the East. But the playoffs, that's where legacies are written. They took down the Nets, outlasted the Hornets, survived a brutal 7-game war against the Pacers. And then, in the finals, they met their ultimate test, the Utah Jazz, Karl Malone, John Stockton, the best team in the West, hungry for revenge after falling short the year before. The 1998 NBA Finals were a heavyweight fight. Every possession was a battle. And in Game 6, with time winding down, history was waiting to be made. That wasn't just a shot. That was the exclamation point on an era. The Bulls had done it. 6 championships, the three-peats. The greatest dynasty of the modern NBA. But instead of celebrating a bright future, they knew the truth: this was the end. 4. The breakup. In the months following their 6th championship, the inevitable happened. The dynasty didn't fade away, it was dismantled, piece by piece. Phil Jackson, the mastermind behind their success, was not brought back. Without his leadership, Michael Jordan stood by his word: if Phil was gone, he was gone. And so, on January 13, 1999, Jordan announced his second retirement from the NBA. Scottie Pippen, the unsung hero of the dynasty, had endured years of being underpaid and underappreciated. He was traded to the Houston Rockets. Dennis Rodman, the defensive force, was released. Steve Kerr and Luke Longley were gone. Just like that, the team that had dominated the NBA was no more. Meanwhile, Jerry Krause was already looking ahead. He believed the Bulls could rebuild, that they could find new stars and start fresh. But what he failed to understand was that you don't just replace a dynasty. Chicago entered a rebuilding phase immediately, but the magic was gone. Without their core, the Bulls spiraled into years of mediocrity. The franchise, once the pinnacle of basketball, became a shadow of its former self. And the worst part, it didn't have to end this way. 5. Could it have been avoided? So, was this collapse avoidable? Could the Bulls have won a 7th championship? Many believe that if the team had stayed together for just one more season, they could have made another deep playoff run. But egos, money, and power struggles prevented that from happening. The front office was unwilling to bend, and the players were unwilling to stay under the circumstances presented. The sad truth is, dynasties don't last forever. But the Chicago Bulls didn't just fade away, they were dismantled. And that is what makes their breakup one of the most controversial moments in sports history. Outro. The dynasty was over, but its legacy, that would last forever. Michael Jordan eventually returned to the NBA with the Washington Wizards, but it was never the same. Scottie Pippen had brief stints with the Rockets and Trail Blazers. Phil Jackson, he found new glory with the Lakers, adding 5 more rings to his collection. But the Chicago Bulls, they have never reached the same heights again. The story of the 90s Bulls isn't just about winning. It's about what happens when greatness collides with ego, when dynasties end not on the court, but in the boardroom. And as we look back, one question still lingers: was this the greatest team ever assembled? Or was there still one last dance left untaken? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Could the Bulls have won a 7th championship, or was their fate already sealed? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the greatest moments in sports history.